Jesus, The Guidelines of Forgiveness, Part 1, APR 13, 2007. Jesus, The Guidelines of Forgiveness, Part 1, transcribed and typed by Jesus through the interdimensional portal. Date, April 13th, 2007. I am in this moment explaining to all my experience during the process of forgiveness. What I have realized is that there are two different types of experiences of forgiveness. The one application of forgiveness is genuine, honest forgiveness, where words are spoken loudly and the corrective application is done. The other is resistance forgiveness, where the ego prevails, instead of self-awareness stepping forth as a result due to forgiveness not being done with application and corrective action. Let's, for example, take being one and being two. They are currently experiencing a relationship with one another. I am using this example specifically as this is the most prominent experience of all human beings on Earth. Also, to prepare them for possible situations that may occur during the relationship when each is introduced to the application of forgiveness to support themselves during and with the process to come. Being one, realizing the extent of allowance through their thoughts, beliefs, views, and preconceived ideas, immediately, they through this realization apply forgiveness in every moment. The reason for being one starting with the application of forgiveness is to support self, as self has realized what has been allowed through thoughts, actions, and words of the past, how their thoughts, actions, and words from previous experiences created the consequences in which they find themselves now. This being done through participating in thoughts, actions, and conversations that are not of who they really are, but the mind which they have come trust as being who they really are. Being one, with complete understanding and realization, has now become conscious, not aware yet, of the mind, and that they've allowed themselves to be a system, to trust a system and commit their lives, build their lives, and experience themselves as the system. Through becoming conscious, being one decided and declared in one moment of realization of what they have allowed, to put a stop to this allowance and not allow themselves to be controlled by the mind. The mind is who they are, a mere copy of generations of family that have gone before them and have not once in their life actually experienced who they really are. Thus, being one stands up for themselves to allow themselves to unconditionally participate in the application of forgiveness, which has been presented as a solution to support them in releasing themselves from the mind, which is a system copied from generations of family that have gone before them. Being one applies forgiveness in every moment of experiencing themselves, applying forgiveness for each thought, action, and word to which they have defined themselves as through the mind. Doing this to release themselves from conditionings dictated to them by parents as acceptable methods and ways of existence, to set themselves free from preconceived ideas and beliefs of the mind, which is systems and not who they really are at all. The importance of the necessity of forgiveness is understood by being one and unconditionally supports themselves with the support of the application of forgiveness. Not only are the words spoken loudly for them to hear the words they speak with the application of forgiveness, but are also applying the necessary corrective action. See, the mind created through thought, action, and words. Now, the application with forgiveness transforms this to a different method of creation, which is the redefinition of self, where awareness, corrective action, and words spoken loudly are applied to release self from the mind creations. Awareness is only experienced once forgiveness is applied through the loudly spoken words, and when corrective action is taken, and from this moment self is released from the specific application which required forgiveness and corrective action in. Not once again returns to such a previous application again. Self-awareness is the experience of self free and released from the mind. Being one specific application is as follows. When a thought arrives within the mind, and being one then acts on this thought and voices themselves as this thought to others, they after this application realize that they have participated in conversation with others through a habitual application coming from the mind. Forgiveness is then spoken out loudly, voicing the forgiveness to themselves of the allowance of this thought, the allowance of acting on this thought, the allowance of believing this thought created by the mind to be themselves, and then the allowance of communicating to others in words that had originated from a thought by the mind and was not words as who they are. This is forgiveness being done through voicing the words loudly. The next step is the practical corrective application. Now, being one is conscious of what has been allowed, and the next time before they enter in conversation with others, They will first make sure that there are no thoughts in their mind, which could influence their actions and words spoken within conversation with others, so they may step in and participate with others in conversation as if they are in a moment clear of any mind creation. This is where awareness of self steps forth. The moment being one participates in conversation with others as who they are, their words spoken are who they are, their actions are who they are. It was not beforehand created by a thought, which created an action, which influenced the words being spoken. Sometimes it may even be so that being one doesn't allow themselves to participate in conversations with others they previously allowed themselves to, as they realized they also allowed themselves to define themselves to other beings in their world. With this realization, being one releases themselves from mostly everything in their world because they see and understand that their world and everything and everyone within it supported them as the mind, consciousness, idea as who they believed themselves to really be. Being one releases themselves from anything and everything which supported them in and as their mind consciousness systems. Their experience of themselves changed from the perspective that they dedicate and discipline themselves to such an extent through the realization of forgiveness with corrective application. They do not allow themselves to participate with anything from the past, any conversation, any beings in their world which do not support them in this process of self-realization as awareness. The application of forgiveness to redefine self and experience who we really are as awareness is the road less traveled, as no being is certain what they are going to experience as themselves, as who they really are, as all they have ever known is the mind and the trust placed in it to direct and control and define themselves as it, becoming the mind, thoughts, preconceived ideas and beliefs. Being one is an example of forgiveness with corrective application to support self with the release and setting free of the mind as thoughts, preconceived ideas, beliefs, and views created from generations of family before them. This is self-dedication, self-commitment, self-responsibility, and self-discipline to stand up and not allow themselves to be delegated, controlled, and directed by the mind, thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as they have realized, seen, and understood that they are not their mind. Through realizing they are not their mind, they become conscious of this tool and support themselves through forgiveness with corrective application to experience themselves as who they really as awareness. Now, we have being two who was introduced to forgiveness the same moment being one was introduced to forgiveness. Their approach is slightly different. They perceive speaking forgiveness softly in the mind and or merely just speaking the words of forgiveness without doing the necessary corrective action will be enough to assist them. Though, even if they do merely just speak the words, there is no indication in their behavior or actions of any corrective action being applied with forgiveness to support them to release themselves from their mind with thoughts, beliefs, views, and preconceived ideas of generations that have gone before them. Why is it that speaking forgiveness only without corrective action will not support being two with releasing themselves from the mind as what they have come to trust and believe themselves to be? The simple reason is as follows. The mind works through thought and actions, where the words are the example and expression as who the being is within the mind construct. The thoughts create the actions which, when applied frequently and the same thoughts are allowed within the mind, transform into a habit. This habit, through continuous application, becomes an accepted part of the being, and the being defines themselves as being this habitual application created by the mind. The problem arrives when being two only voices forgiveness or does it silently in the mind, because then only the thought is forgiven. But the actual action of the habit as the being participates in the world is not corrected. The forgiveness done is then useless and worthless. The thought will then reoccur continuously because the mind creation is supported by the being's participation in the actions. The full and complete application of allowance is able to be noticed by self within actions and behaviors. If the actions and behaviors through participation within conversation with others remain exactly the same and the thoughts keep reoccurring, you must know and remember that only the forgiveness as words spoken had been applied and corrective action had not been applied totally and completely, unconditionally. Through my experience, beings such as the being two scenario, through just speaking the words softly, silently, or just merely speaking the words, are beings who actually refuse to support themselves to set themselves free from their mind as a system copied from generations that have gone before them. They'd prefer remaining within their old methods of experiencing themselves with support and trust in the mind as thoughts, ideas, belief systems and views as who they apparently are. They actually fear supporting themselves and letting go of their mind, as they have allowed themselves to define themselves as their mind so extensively. They fear who they will become as who they really are as awareness with supportive forgiveness, with corrective application. Another slightly different approach of the being two scenario is where they totally and completely discard the application of forgiveness with corrective action, stating that they do not apparently require forgiveness as they are satisfied and content with themselves as the mind, being controlled by thoughts, actions, and words as mind creations which they have come to trust as who they are. This, unfortunately, is not true, as all beings on earth have become the controlled and directed robots of the mind, nothing more than that. Forgiveness with corrective application is the one and only key to support self in becoming and experiencing awareness as whom they really are, free and released from their mind. Another approach the being two scenario is able to apply and uses stating the words, "But I have finished applying forgiveness. I am done. I have achieved my goal. It is done. This is impossible." When such words are spoken, it is the ego. This particular and specific action and spoken words are words spoken from the mind and used to justify and defend their self-defined world based on thoughts, beliefs, preconceived ideas, and views as the mind. They are trapped through fear of loss. Any being, for that matter, who do not unconditionally apply forgiveness with corrective action fear losing themselves, apparently, but they haven't allowed themselves to realize, see, and understand that they have defined themselves as a mind, as a systems, as a copy of those that have gone before them. Watch this being's participation with others in their world. Observe the words they use and their specific behaviors. I guarantee that you will notice nothing had changed. They are still exactly the same. The ego as being two had taken charge and taken over, finding another way to not allow the being to apply corrective action with loudly spoken words as forgiveness for self, because if the sly and clever mind would allow this, the being will no longer be a slave but be free and released from the mind constructs and created habits which will allow them to experience themselves as who they are as awareness. Fear of loss extends not only within self, but also the world within which being two experiences themselves. Thus, fear of loss extends to fearing losing those whom surround them in their world, everything which supports them as their mind consciousness systems as who they have come to believe themselves to be, and fears letting anything unconditionally go to within this application release themselves unconditionally from all and everything which supported them and as what they have defined themselves as within their application as the mind consciousness system. This is a lengthy process, for we have for eons of time allowed the mind as consciousness to direct and control us and have allowed ourselves to define ourselves to a system which is not who we are at all. Forgiveness goes hand in hand with corrective application. The applications are one and become the new relationship establishment of self within self to release self from conditionings and controls of the mind. A relationship is not able to flourish or even exist if the one is not present. Thus, self-support to experience self as awareness as who each really are will not be effective in any way whatsoever if only forgiveness is applied without the corrective necessary application. Forgiveness must become as one with self through this process of self-realization, must become so part of self as the necessity of every breath required to be able to exist and live in this world. I myself still continue with forgiveness and corrective application when I find I have not been honest with myself, for instance. In a moment of plicantion, forgiveness with corrective application becomes a way of life as it becomes one's foundational support and stability during this process of self-realization and awareness. This application of forgiveness with corrective application never stops. It becomes a part of self in every moment. It becomes who you are to support and stabilize yourself during this process. Now, after this description as the two different scenarios within being one and being two's approach to the application of forgiveness, introduced to forgiveness at the same time. Imagine these two beings as they experience themselves within a relationship. This relationship will consist of constant conflict as being one becomes more and more aware of whom they are as awareness through dedication, commitment, and discipline towards themselves with support of forgiveness with corrective application. Being one has started to develop and stabilize themselves through forming and establishing a relationship with self with the application of forgiveness with corrective action. clearly defining within themselves the difference between the mind and consciousness and awareness as who they really are, what they will accept and allow in their world, and what they won't accept and allow in their worlds. Being two through fear of loss refuses to unconditionally completely support themselves through support of forgiveness with corrective application. They remain the same mind consciousness systems as who they have been for most of their lives, as they have become comfortable and content with their self defined limited world, and wants to keep it that way to maintain control over what they apparently have as who they are. Instead of allowing themselves to place their trust within themselves and walk this process with support of forgiveness with corrective application, they decide to remain within trust of their mind. Being one, clearly able to notice what being two is allowing, because being one has now become aware of the difference between behaviors and actions of the mind and consciousness and awareness, will reveal to being two what they are allowing. Being one will stand up as who they are as awareness and not allow the mind as consciousness to influence the other, because being one have realized the consequences, suppressions, deceit, lies, and dishonesties that the mind create as an experience of self if allowed as an experience of being two. If being two does not allow themselves to unconditionally participate through supporting themselves with forgiveness and corrective action, being one will most surely not tolerate such allowances and ask the being to leave their presence, because the statement will be, "You either walk with me together as equals so we may support each other through not allowing each other to participate in any mind consciousness creations as we have come to accept and believe ourselves to be, thus transferring our trust within ourselves from the mind to experience and express ourselves as awareness. Or you must go, because I will not allow your stubbornness and fear of loss to influence my process. This is who I am. This is what I am doing. This is who I am becoming. Awareness as who I really am, to set myself free from mind creations as thoughts, beliefs, ideas, and views of generations of family that have gone before me. I am not allowing myself to be a system. I am not allowing myself to be a copy of others. I stop this now and have experienced the results through forgiveness with corrective application, and I see you have not allowed yourself to support yourself as I have. Thus, are you walking with me as equals so we may support each other and experience ourselves as who we really are, or are you leaving the inevitability of relationship if both do not allow themselves to stand up as equals, as one, to experience themselves through support of forgiveness with corrective action? Is either the one will stand up and voice who they are to the other, or both will influence each other to such a vast extent that neither allow each other to support themselves through forgiveness with corrective application. Through supporting themselves and developing the relationship with self through forgiveness and corrective application being applied as one, the support and relationship with self is reflected as an experience of themselves within their world. If the one is strong enough to stand up and say, either you join me and walk with me as equal, or you leave, by doing this making a statement of self as awareness, the one that is standing up is honoring themselves. If both allow each other to fall in the trap, enslavement and control of the mind, their relationship will inevitably fall soon, which will just take longer for them to realize, see, and understand who they really are as awareness after the relationship had fallen. So, be careful, beings who are in relationship together, that you do not compromise yourself in your own individual process of forgiveness with corrective application for the other, but that you honor yourself in every moment, irrelevant if the other decides to support you as you are supporting yourself or not. An extra addition of what I have realized is that if there is anything I fear letting go of or giving up in my world or of myself, this I found was an indication that I have defined myself as this something I fear letting go of or giving up through my mind consciousness system, and that I must allow myself to walk through the resistance of giving this up and letting this go unconditionally, because I have learned the difficult and hard way. If I do not do it, the universe as myself will forcefully take it from me, because to a certain extent I do realize that this something does not support or stand with me as who I am as awareness, but is supporting my mind as another point of control to not allow me to see, understand, and realize who I am. What I realized is that fear of loss only exists in the mind because I am not able to lose anything, not even myself. I am infinitely here as awareness. Fear of loss derives from obsession, possession, want, and need, which only exist in the mind and not as whom I am as awareness. I realized that if I fear losing something, fear letting it go or giving it up, I have defined myself as this something and that an idea exists. If I let it go and give it up unconditionally, I will apparently in some way lose myself. This losing of self is impossible and only exists in the mind. This is Jesus saying enjoy.